Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're reacting to a video about the American Civil War. So for our friends, American friends, you should know about that bloody conflict between yourself and yourself. Unfortunately, a lot of dead. I'm not very familiar with this conflict, so it will be very interesting to learn about it. I know about General Lee, I know about obviously Lincoln, um, the Confederate, the Union, but I don't know all the details, so it will be very interesting. If you like the video, subscribe. We're trying to reach 100 subscribers by the end of this year, so we're talking about 2025, obviously. Um, and obviously, of course, as usual, the video will be, the original video will be in the description. It's an original video from Agent Flappy, so go check their channel. They have a lot of good videos about history, especially American history. Let's get to it.
The bloodiest day in American history, to the emotional surrender of a Confederate general, to the president saving America from the brink of collapse, and then being assassinated 5 days later. This is the American Civil War explained. A war so violent it killed more Americans than any other war in U.S. history. And if it wasn't for some legendary heroes,
Even World War II? I'm gonna double check that. I wasn't aware of that.
we wouldn't have made it out alive. But let's go back, because wars don't just pop out of nowhere. They simmer, they stew, and by the time 1861 rolled around, exploded. Because the United States was basically two worlds living under one flag. Up north, it was speeding towards the future,
Is it really different today? Not really. You haven't changed, guys.
with factories, big cities, and railroads. And down south, well, the economy ran on cotton, an empire powered by 4 million slaves. But it wasn't just about dollars and cotton. It was about power, morality, and who got to define America. And this flared up every time a new territory joined the Union. Would it be a free state or a slave state? And here's the thing, whoever controlled more states controlled Congress, controlled policy, and basically controlled the future.
Yeah, as I said, it hasn't changed anything.
So for decades, presidents just slapped duct tape on the problem. The Missouri Compromise.
Original 13 colonies. Do you see them? Over British territories. Just see like Red River Basin 1818 on the top. States, okay. State claim. Oh, that must be above Michigan territories. Special status area. What the hell that means? A lot of digging into it. There's a lot of Googling to be done. Territories, okay. Unorganized territories. Again, what does it mean? Claimed area and foreign area. Spanish treaty line. Okay. Ah, you were a mess.
The Compromise of
Oh,
18.
there's another one here. States. So that's 1850. Okay. Territories over countries. So we got Mexico. Okay, good for you, Mexico. And Russian America. Okay. And the Kingdom of Hawaii, not to forget. And disputed areas. Okay, do you see any disputed areas? Am I the only one? It's really confusing.
1850. It was like patching a sinking ship with a band aid. Sir, we're gonna need more tape. And by election day 1860, it finally blew its lid. Cause unlike most presidents before him, Abraham Lincoln wasn't born sipping tea on fine china. He came from the dirt. Literally. He grew up in a one
Like most of the great, if you think about it.
room log cabin in Kentucky. His mother died when he was 9, and he had less than a year of schooling. But Lincoln had something you just can't teach: grit. Because after a full day of chopping wood, he taught himself law. And by the time he stepped into politics, people called him Honest Abe, a lawyer that actually stood by his word. In fact, Abe once walked miles to return 6 cents of change to a customer he accidentally overcharged. That's the kind of guy this dude was. A man of character. But what made Lincoln so dangerous to the South is that he opposed the expansion of slavery. Because when he got elected president without a single Southern state, it was basically game.
In fact, his killer, Booth, I think his name is. I'm very bad with names, so just correct me if I'm wrong. But his killer was in the audience during this speech. I think I've read that somewhere. Again, I'm not entirely sure, but I think he was in. You can see him on the picture. Yeah, that's it. Unless I've read something wrong on the internet, because everything is true on the internet. Yeah, I think he's there.
Over for the South. And South Carolina didn't wait around for the welcome speech. Because before Lincoln could even unpack his bags, they seceded from the Union. And within weeks, 6 more states followed: Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas, who all got together and formed a brand new nation, the Confederate States of America. But Lincoln didn't jump the gun and invade the South. Instead, it all started with an island fortress off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, Fort Sumter, one of the last Union outposts in Confederate territory.
I never heard
Problem?
of it.
Both sides claimed it. So Lincoln faced an impossible choice. If he sent supplies, the South would call it an invasion. If he abandoned the fort, the North would see him as weak. So he chose a middle path and sent only food. No guns, no ammo, just
An American not sending gun or ammo. Are we sure he was American? Good for you, Abe.
bread, beans, and the hope that the Confederates would just look the other way. My man was basically trying to deliver DoorDash to avoid the Civil War. But unfortunately, the South wasn't hungry for compromise. Cause Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard gave the order: open fire! And for 34 straight hours, cannons thundered across Charleston Harbor. Yet somehow, miraculously, no one died. Ouch! But when the Union command
They must have had some stormtroopers shooting. Or they did it on purpose. They wanted to scare them.
commander surrendered, the message echoed across the nation: war had begun. So Lincoln didn't waste a second and called for 75,000 volunteers to crush the rebellion, which ironically poured more fuel on the fire. Because 4 more states, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, joined the Confederacy. Sir, I think that backfired. But Virginia was the big one, the crown jewel, because its secession didn't just double the Confederacy's size, it delivered their greatest military weapon: Robert E. Lee, the son of a Revolutionary War hero, a West Point graduate who finished second in his class, and a decorated veteran of the Mexican-American War. Believe it or not, when the Union needed a commander, Lincoln actually offered Lee the job. But he turned it down. And not for the reason you might think. Because Lee opposed secession, and even called slavery a moral and political evil. But when Virginia left the Union, Lee faced his own impossible choice: fight against his country or fight against his home. And he sided with Virginia, gifting the Confederates.
Can't blame the man. I love my country, but you should always side for your family, your home. I mean, it's a difficult situation. It's easy today, in retrospect, to say what he should have done or not done. But yeah, I understand his choice.
One of the sharpest military minds in history. But here's the crazy part: both sides assumed the war would be over pretty quick. Because when Union troops marched toward Virginia, the mood was almost festive. People from DC actually packed picnic baskets and rode out in carriages to watch the battle. Anyone have some popcorn? Ooh, don't mind.
I don't know why. It seems it's always the case. Um, it was the case before World War One. It seems to have been the case in World War Two, and probably going to be the case for the next World War. But it seems that we always think that it will be easy, quick, a picnic, but it never is. It's always bloody. This war was bloody. I know for a fact that this war was terribly bloody.
If I do. But the good vibes didn't last long, 'cause the Battle of Bull Run began with the two armies colliding. And at first, the Union pushed the Confederates back. But when Brigadier General Thomas Jackson arrived with his brigade, the Confederates rallied. One Confederate officer even pointed and shouted, "There stands Jackson like a stone wall!" And the nickname stuck. Stonewall Jackson had arrived, allowing the Confederates to regroup and counterattack, where they broke the Union line and forced them to retreat in a full-blown panic. And it was so chaotic, civilian carriages were bumping into Union troops in the rush to get home. Hey, wait up! Can somebody give me a ride? But this was only the beginning, because 1862 would unleash a level of violence America had never seen before. Down in Tennessee, a quiet, cigar-chewing Union general named Ulysses S. Grant was making his move. He captured Fort Henry, then Fort Donelson.
I like that we have pictures because obviously I've never been to these places. I've been twice in United States, and both of this time were for New York. In New York, it was great, loved it truly. But I never visited all these places. There's a lot of nice places in the United States that I'd like to visit. This is one of those.
And when the Confederate commander asked for surrender terms, Grant replied with the line that made him famous: "No terms except unconditional and immediate surrender can be accepted." Translation: I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to win. But Grant's real test came at a place called Shiloh, where Confederate forces launched a surprise attack and Union lines buckled. But Grant didn't panic. He never panicked. That night, reinforcements arrived, and at sunrise, Grant counterattacked, and hard. Because by the end of day two, the Confederates were the ones retreating. Whew! A close call, right? Well, not exactly. Because when the smoke cleared, it revealed over 23,000 casualties, more than all previous American wars combined. I just can't believe it. So, with war heating up, Lincoln desperately needed someone to lead his main army. And in comes General George McClellan, young, brilliant, and a guy convinced he was Napoleon 2.0.
No, it wasn't.
But McClellan's confidence came with a fatal flaw. He hated taking risks. If the stars weren't aligned, the weather wasn't perfect.
That is literally the opposite of Napoleon. Napoleon loved taking risks and taking the initiative.
Percent in his favor, he just wouldn't attack. "Get back in line, Flappy." "Sorry, sir."
Oh, he's
Meanwhile,
Flappy.
Lincoln
I was
was
wondering
losing
why
his
this bird
patience.
was
He sent
all around the
McClellan a
place.
note saying,
This
"If you
eagle.
don't want to use the army, I would like to borrow it for a while."
That's a roast. Imagine being roasted by Lincoln.
McClellan finally launched the Peninsula Campaign, a massive push to capture Richmond, the Confederate capital. And for a moment, it looked like the crazy kid might pull it off. Union troops got so close they could hear Richmond's church bells ringing. But that's when everything changed. As the new commander took charge of the Confederate Army, Robert E. Lee. And oh boy, did he not waste a moment. Because Lee went straight on the attack and hammered
It was good.
McClellan's army. Mud, bayonets, forest on fire. It was straight up madness. Yet, in the end, Lee actually lost more men than McClellan. But he didn't care. He'd achieved exactly what he wanted. The Union Army pushed away from Richmond, and McClellan's confidence was shattered. And shattered is the perfect way to put it, because McClellan walked away convinced he'd been outnumbered, outmatched, and crushed by some massive Confederate force. But in reality, Lee's army was smaller. So, riding high from his victories, Lee made a bold move and took the war into the North by invading Maryland. But that's when fate dropped a plot twist so crazy, Miss Flappy thought I was literally making this up. But I'm not.
He just invented a girlfriend out of nowhere. And she's from Canada. What was a female bird all of a sudden?
Swear. Cause a Union soldier stumbled across an abandoned Confederate campsite and found a copy of Lee's battle plan. There it was, the full blueprint. McClellan.
How? How do you leave your battle plan behind? Lee, what the hell? He must have hated himself so much. How?
He held the Confederacy's playbook in his hands.
Oh, go ahead,
So,
fake
with this
Napoleon.
new advantage, up against Lee's tactical genius, we finally got ourselves a fair fight. And what came next was the bloodiest day in American history, the Battle of Antietam, where Union troops surged into a cornfield and faced a storm of lead. Men charged, fell, and charged again. Bodies dropped everywhere. And one soldier later said a man could walk from one end of the field to the other without ever touching the ground. Horrifying. But just when you thought the battle couldn't get worse, it moved to Bloody Lane.
We are very lucky today. Look at that. Fighting in the mud, dying there among thousands upon thousands of people. For what?
A sunken road where Confederates packed in and mowed down wave after wave of Union soldiers charging straight into their rifles. Eventually, Union troops flanked the road and fired downward into the trapped Confederates below, creating a mass grave carved into the earth. But the final push came at Antietam Creek, where Union forces crossed the bridge to finish Lee's army for good. Until, out of nowhere, surprise reinforcements appeared and forced the Union back. The cornfield.
So many twists in this battle. I'll watch a movie about this.
Changed hands 15 times, and Bloody Lane
15
stacked
times.
3 deep. And when the sun finally set, there were more than 23,000 casualties. The single bloodiest day in American history was over. And on paper, Antietam was a draw. But strategically, the Union forced Lee to retreat. Or I'll be flying the flag at half-mast for the next decade, because that was just devastating. But back in D.C., Lincoln wanted to use this momentum to his advantage. So he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all slaves are and henceforward shall be free. Woohoo! Well, the only problem was it didn't actually free anyone in Confederate states yet, but it did give Union soldiers a moral cause worth fighting for. It allowed black men to enlist, with nearly 200,000 answering the call.
It's a lot. It's great. I mean, it's a good cause, and obviously, as a black man, you probably want to fight for this. They have all reason to enlist and go fight for it. I mean, a lot of men died for a good cause, for a better future, true. But I think this could have been achieved with better politics and better leader. I think it could have been achieved with less bloodshed.
And shut the door on European intervention.
Yes, that is true. Because the thing is, Britain was the first country to abolish slavery. And then after that, there were France and then the United States. Although I think France abolished first and Napoleon put it back. He wasn't perfect. But yeah, the British were about to intervene in this war because it wasn't good for their trade. especially with the South. So by branding the North as fighter against slavery, um, Lincoln did a perfect move because the British could not side with the South now, or else he would be saying, okay, we're fighting in favor of slavery. So obviously they did not.
Because Britain and France
That
could
was
no
good.
longer side with the Confederacy without openly defending slavery. Yep, Lincoln had officially changed the game. But he had another big problem on his hands. A general problem. Because Robert E. Lee was on the move again. This time marching 75,000 men into
Stop the
Pennsylvania.
Lee.
And Lincoln was desperate for a commander who could finally stop him. So he made another change at the top and
Bring
replaced
Grant.
his general with George Meade. Just 3 days before battle.
Oh no. Okay.
Meade wasn't a
Sorry.
genius, but he was solid. Calm under pressure, and the kind of guy who wouldn't panic if I misfired my gun. Sorry, sir. But it all kicked off when Confederate and Union forces collided near a quiet little town called Gettysburg. And by nightfall,
Oh,
the
I heard of
Confederates had the upper hand. But
Gettysburg.
on day 2, the battle didn't just continue. It erupted into chaos. Because Lee launched massive assaults on both Union flanks, and one of the fiercest attacks came at Little Round Top, a rocky hill that anchored the entire Union line. If it fell, the battle, and maybe even the war, could have been lost. But that's when Colonel Joshua Chamberlain and his 20th Maine made a heroic stand. Outnumbered and out of ammunition, Chamberlain had nothing left to shoot, so he ordered one final desperate move. A bayonet charge downhill. And against all odds, it worked. Meanwhile, on the other...
You see, I never heard about that. Maybe if you are American, you've heard about it. Let me know if they teach you this at school. But I never heard of this, which is a shame. It's a hill. The history was changed there. Those men changed history, and I never heard of them. Can you imagine what would have happened if the South win here? Tell me in the comment what you think it would have been, like the United States would have been if the South had won the war. I guess you would have two states, the Confederate and the Union. You're not gonna have the United States. A lot of African American today would be slaves. Although I don't know, maybe slavery would have been abolished eventually at some point, or there would have been another war further down the line, most probably. But yeah, let me know in the comment what you think. I would love to see a movie about this. You could have an epic movie or series about the American Civil War instead of having Jurassic Park 4 or Ghostbuster 2 or some superhero movies. And don't get me wrong, I like superheroes, but we have so many now. Or Fast and Furious 27, or God knows how many they've made. I don't know. I lost track. I stopped watching after 3. But yeah, a movie about this, just this battle, or just this episode, or the entire Civil War. There might be some movies over there. I know. No, The Patriot is about the Revolution, American Revolution. I don't know exactly if there's a movie out there. Let me know. I'd like to watch a movie, a good movie about the American Civil War, because it's a big piece of history. Now let's continue.
flank, Confederate forces stormed Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill as night fell. The fighting devolved into ruthless hand-to-hand combat in the dark. But again, the Union refused to break. Lee had thrown everything at Meade's flanks and failed. Enraged, Lee made a fateful decision: attack the center. So on day 3, Confederate artillery unleashed the largest bombardment ever seen in the Western Hemisphere. Cannons thundered, the earth trembled, and the sky turned to smoke so thick it swallowed the sun. And then, silence. Out of the drifting haze, 12,000 Confederate soldiers emerged and began their march. Pickett's charge, the last gamble. So the Union line waited and then unleashed a storm of bullets. Men fell by the hundreds, but still the Gray Line pushed forward. And somehow, a few hundred Confederates actually broke through. Led by General Lewis Armistead, they reached the Union guns. And in an effort to flip the battle, Armistead placed his hand on a Union cannon and shouted for his men to fire the enemy cannons back at him. But little did he know, this was the furthest any Confederate would ever get on Northern soil. 'Cause when Armistead turned around, he was completely alone. Bang! The charge had failed.
Who witnessed this? If he died, who can say that it happened that way? I mean, don't get me wrong. Once again, it's a fantastic story, and once again, I'd love to see a movie about that. But is it like the Union who come up with that story, or the Confederate? I don't know. Usually, the victors are making history, are writing histories. But how do we know that he put his hand on the cannon and all of that? I don't know. If it's a true story, that's amazing. I mean, not for him, but
Of the 12,000 men
for
who
his story.
began that march, less than half returned uninjured. And when Lee rode out to meet the survivors, tears streamed down his face. "It's all my fault," he quietly said to himself. "It's all my fault." The Battle of Gettysburg proved to be the deadliest of the Civil War, resulting 50,000 casualties total. But while Gettysburg shook the East, another battle was roaring 900 miles away. 'Cause General Ulysses S. Grant had spent months trying and
Here comes
failing
Grant.
to capture Vicksburg, the last Confederate fortress on the Mississippi River. So he decided to change it up and do something borderline insane. At 2 a.m., Grant rolled the dice and sent Union gunboats right past Vicksburg's cannons, fully aware that
This is Napoleon's type of thinking, out of the box. If you want to win, and this happened everywhere in life, if you want to win, you have to think outside the box.
even one was hit, the whole plan would collapse. But it was so dark, the cannons couldn't see a thing, and the
Audacity.
boat slid right past them, allowing Grant to finally tighten his grip around Vicksburg. 'Cause inside, Confederate soldiers ran out of food. They ate mules, dogs, and eventually rats. "Hey boys, maybe stay away from the Eagles, all right? Pretty please."
You can
But
fly.
by July 4th, 1863, the Confederates in Vicksburg surrendered. Now, with Gettysburg in the east and Vicksburg in the west, the war had officially turned. 'Cause now it was clear as day. Lincoln had finally found his general,
So it's basically Lee against the North, basically.
Ulysses S. Grant, who he promoted to command all Union armies. And Grant wasted no time setting his strategy. In the West, he handed command to William Sherman with the order, destroy the Confederate army in Georgia and take Atlanta. Meanwhile, in the East, Grant set his own sights on Robert E. Lee. And they both locked horns in a bloodbath across Virginia.
Battle of the
First at the
Titan.
Wilderness, they fought in a thick forest with gun smoke so thick soldiers could barely see in front of them. And after 2 days of combat, Grant's losses were enormous. Every Union general before him had retreated after facing Lee, but not Grant. He marched south, still attacking, still pushing, and still grinding Lee down. At Spotsylvania, bodies piled so high they had to be dragged away just to keep fighting. One oak tree 2 feet thick was cut down by rifle fire alone. Then came Cold Harbor, where Grant ordered an assault turned disaster. 'Cause more than 7,000 Union soldiers fell in less than an hour. Grant later admitted it was the one attack he truly regretted. But here's one thing Lee couldn't do: stop him. 'Cause every time Grant lost men, he replaced them. And every time Lee lost men, he didn't get them back. So by the siege of
Yeah, this is what I've read, and this is the impression I have about the Civil War, the American Civil War. It's that it's a lot about it's a war of attrition. The South needed to win fast, and they almost made it. and the North needed to resist and then push back, which is exactly what happened.
Petersburg, the fighting dragged on for 9 brutal months. Lee's army was pinned down, starving, and cut off. And at the same time, Northern newspapers called Grant the Butcher for wasting tens of thousands of Union lives. But Lincoln understood what others didn't. I can't spare this man. He fights. In
He
other
won.
words,
He's
Grant is the
winning.
first general willing to do what it actually takes to win. Meanwhile, in the West, General Sherman took things in a, let's call it, a unique direction. 'Cause he believed in something called total war, which means not just defeating the enemy, but breaking their will to fight. War is cruelty. There's no use trying to reform it. The crueler it is, the sooner it'll be over. So,
Yeah, I kind of agree with this kind of thinking. Um, it's like with bullying. The stronger you are, the less likely you're going to be victim of bullying. So if you want to avoid war, you need to be strong. You need to portray strength. If you are soft, you are going to be attacked at some point, one point or the other. No matter what you said, no matter what you do, you're going to be attacked. It works with countries, it works with individuals, and that's why we have bullying, because we have people who don't fight back. Now, once the war has started, I think there's two things here. The first is about cruelty. What he says is basically the more cruel you are, the the more likely you're going to demoralize the opponent and put an end to the war fast. So it sounds cruel, but you may be by these actions save hundreds of thousands of lives, um, which is the principle behind the atomic bomb in Japan. I mean, we could debate on that, but I guess that's why it was dropped on Japanese people. And then the second thing is about demoralizing um, the other side. Once again, if they don't want to fight you, less death on both sides. So yes, I totally agree with that. Let's see what he's going to do, however. As long as he's not going after the civil, the women and the children. If it's going for infrastructures or other armies or something out of the box, I'm all for it. Let's see
throughout the
what he
summer
does.
of 1864, Sherman pushed toward Atlanta, and by September, it fell. Afterwards, Sherman sent a simple telegram to Lincoln: Atlanta is ours, and fairly won. And the timing couldn't have been better, 'cause Lincoln faced re-election in November, and things weren't looking too good. War fatigue was high, casualties were staggering, and public confidence was slipping away. But when Sherman achieved victory in Atlanta, everything changed. Lincoln won re-election in a landslide. Woohoo!
He was a Republican, by the way, Lincoln. It's basically the Republican who abolished slavery in the United States.
But wait, the war wasn't over yet, and Sherman knew it. So instead of stopping in
Go
Atlanta,
for it, Sherman.
he proposed something radical: march across
The
Georgia to the
Sherminator.
Atlantic and destroy everything of military value along the way. I can make this march, Sherman told Grant, and make Georgia howl. Grant approved and unleashed him. So Sherman set Atlanta ablaze and began his legendary March to the Sea, where 60,000 soldiers moved in two massive columns 60 miles wide. They ripped up railroads, burned factories, and everywhere they went, liberated slaves, with thousands joining the march, singing songs of freedom. And by the time Sherman reached Savannah, his army had carved a path of destruction nearly 300 miles long. He sent Lincoln a telegram that simply read, I beg to present you, as a Christmas gift, the city of Savannah. By 1865, the Confederacy was on life support. Lee's army was starving. Men were deserting.
Who was in charge of the Confederacy? Like the Union, they have the president as Lincoln. But who is actually the leader of the Confederacy? All I hear is Lee fighting almost on his own with his men. But who is actually the leader of the Confederacy?
And ammunition was almost gone when Union forces broke through at Five Forks and severed Lee's last supply line. Within days, Petersburg fell. In Richmond, as Confederate officials fled the capital, they set fire to their own warehouses to keep supplies from falling into Union hands. But the flames raged out of control, burning Richmond to the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Lee fled west with 30,000 starving men, but Grant was everywhere. He cut off every road, bridge, in hope of escape. It was the end. Lee was completely surrounded. So, with no options left, Lee asked for a meeting with Grant, and they met at Appomattox Courthouse. The contrast between the two generals couldn't have been more stark. Grant arrived in a mud-stained uniform, looking like a soldier who hadn't slept in days, whereas Lee wore his finest dress uniform, every button polished to a shine. He was sending a message: I may be defeated, but I'll surrender with dignity. And Grant offered pretty generous terms. Confederate soldiers could keep their horses, officers could keep their sidearms, and every man would be paroled and allowed to go home. No executions, no treason trials, no revenge. Lee's face softened.
Okay, that's great. But does Grant has authority about that? I mean, I assume he talked to Lincoln before. Not exactly sure how this went down. That's good that they stop it there.
This will have a very happy effect on my army, he said quietly. Lee then asked if Grant could spare rations. Grant nodded. Certainly. How many men? About 25,000. Without hesitation, Grant sent 25,000 rations to Lee's starving soldiers. And when the meeting ended, the two men shook hands. But then came one of the most human moments of the entire war, because Lee mounted his horse and rode back to his army, where soldiers crowded around, reaching for his hand, as tears streaked down their faces. Lee couldn't speak. He simply removed his hat and salute. The Civil War, America's deadliest conflict, was finally over. But there was one final tragedy no one expected. Just 5 days after Lee's surrender, Abraham Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater, where Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth slipped into the presidential box and shot Lincoln in the back of the head. But it wasn't just Lincoln's tragic death that makes it so sad. It was the timing. Abraham Lincoln guided America through its darkest hour, preserved the Union, and struck the chains of slavery from 4 million people, only to die just before he could see the promised land.
And actually, his death did the exact opposite that what his assassin wanted. It turned most American against the Confederate.
We'll miss you, sir. But in the end, the American Civil War didn't just change America. It defined it. Because over 600,000 Americans died, more than all other American wars combined until Vietnam, which is insane to think about. But from its ashes, the United States was given a second chance, a chance to live up to the founders' ideals, that all men are created equal. God bless America, man. I freaking love this place. But speaking of tragic presidential deaths that change...
Alright, so if you like the video, subscribe. Again, trying to reach 100 subscribers by the end of the year. Give a like, please. Now, as I told you in previous videos, I'd like to give a question. Today it's a very easy question. A question at the end of the video, and whoever answers the question first will have its comment pinned at the top. So the question for today, told you it's easy. You ready? What famous statue did France give to the United States? It's easy. It's an easy one. Come on. All right. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.